At first light the land looked endless, the kind of dawn that stretched itself thin over the prairie and set the horizon aflame in pale gold. The air was cool and sharp, smelling of dust and pine sap. A lone rider moved through it slowly, his dark hat casting a long shadow across a face carved by sun and silence. 36 years had hardened him into something both proud and weary. His ranch lay behind him, heavy with wealth but hollow with loneliness. He had built barns that could weather storms, corrals that could hold the wildest of mustangs. But not a single warm voice waited for him when night fell. His strength was known, his hands broad and certain. Yet even that certainty faltered when he thought of the ache that no coin nor land could mend. He rode because riding was the only cure for stillness. The creak of saddle leather and the soft clop of hooves were the closest things to music he had. Sometimes, in the hush before the sun fully woke, he wondered if this was all his life would ever be: endless horizons, endless wealth, endless emptiness. It was then, in that hour where silence feels unbroken, that he heard it. Not the rustle of wind, not the cry of a hawk overhead, but something thinner, sharper. A child's voice. It cut through the air like a reed whistle, faint yet desperate. He stopped, turned his head, listening. Again it came, weak, trembling, and joined by another, a chorus of fear so raw it pulled at him harder than any rope. He spurred his horse toward the sound. The ground shifted beneath him as he drew near a low-lying stretch where the earth looked darker, slicker. And then he saw them. A woman, young but worn by hunger, her hair in long black braids matted with dust. Her buckskin dress clung heavy with mud. Her arms locked around 3 children as the earth itself swallowed them inch by inch. The children, no more than 4, 5, and 6, clutched at her with wide eyes hollowed by hunger. Their little legs kicked helplessly against the pull of the quicksand, each movement dragging them deeper. She did not scream for herself. Her cries were only for them, her voice hoarse as she urged them to stay calm though terror lined every word. Her eyes burned with defiance, yet there was no denying the truth. The earth had claimed them, and it would not let go. The cowboy slid from his saddle, boots sinking in the soft edge of the pit. He knew the danger. He had seen men vanish in soil like this, ground that looked harmless until it opened its hungry mouth. Yet hesitation did not touch him. He pulled the rope from his saddle horn, looped it quick, his breath steady though his heart thundered. He cast the rope, missing once, then twice. The third throw arced true, landing across her chest. She clutched it with one arm, still holding her children with the other, her strength stretched thin, yet unbroken. The cowboy braced his boots deep into firmer soil, wound the rope tight across his palms, and called to his horse. The animal strained, muscles quivering as it stepped backward, hauling against the pit's grip. The earth groaned, sucking, fighting every inch. One child came free first, the smallest, pulled sputtering and gasping onto solid ground. The cowboy knelt, lifted the boy into his arms, and set him aside gently, whispering words the child could not understand but felt all the same. Back went the rope, again and again, until the second child slid free, coughing mud, clinging to the stranger with tiny, trembling fingers. The third resisted longest, the pit sucking at his legs, as though it wished to keep at least one. Yet the rope held, and soon all 3 were safe, huddled together, shivering but alive. Only she remained. Her strength was nearly gone, arms trembling from holding them so long. Yet her eyes met his with fire that refused surrender. For a moment he saw more than fear there. He saw shame, pride, the fierce burden of a mother who could accept death but not dependence. The rope tightened, the horse leaned, and slowly she rose, mud cascading down her dress, her breath coming ragged and fierce. When she reached the edge, he caught her by the arm, pulling her onto solid ground. For a moment she collapsed against him, body trembling, before she drew back quickly, as if closeness itself was more dangerous than quicksand. They sat in silence, the children pressed against her sides, their little chests rising and falling too fast. The cowboy said nothing at first. He had no words ready, only the pounding of his heart and the sting of rope burns across his palms. She looked at him with eyes dark and steady, the eyes of someone who had lost too much already and trusted too little. Yet in them lingered something he had not expected, acknowledgment, fragile as the thin line of dawn itself. He wanted to speak, to ask who she was, what brought her and her children to such peril, but the words felt clumsy. Instead he reached out, brushed a clump of mud from the arm of the smallest child, and gave a soft nod. She straightened, gathering her children closer, and though she did not thank him in words, the way her shoulders lowered, just slightly, was thanks enough. The prairie wind rose, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine. The cowboy mounted his horse again, watching as she gathered herself, her children clinging to her dress. They did not move toward him, nor did they flee. They stood like shadows against the pale grass, watching as he turned his horse back toward the horizon. That night, by the fire, he could not rest. He saw her face each time he closed his eyes, the fierce curve of her jaw, the way she had refused to yield even as the earth tried to claim her. He saw the children's small hands clinging to him, trusting him though they had every reason to trust no one. And he wondered what story lay behind them, where their people were, how hunger had carved their cheeks so hollow, why her pride weighed heavier than fear. He turned the rope in his hands, the burns raw, a reminder of the struggle. The prairie stretched endless around him, stars sharp above, and he felt something stir in the hollow place he had carried too long. It was not yet love, nor even longing, but a seed, small and unshaped, pressing gently against the walls of his solitude. Far away, in the quiet of her camp, she sat with her children wrapped against her sides. They slept quickly, exhaustion drowning fear, but she stayed awake. She thought of the man who had pulled them free, the strength in his arms, the silence in his face. Not like others she had known, not greedy, not cruel. He had looked at her as though she were not a burden, but a soul worth saving. She pressed her forehead against her knees, torn between gratitude and suspicion, between fear of the world she had always known and the faint, dangerous warmth of hope. The children stirred and murmured in sleep, their small fingers curled into hers. She whispered to them of safety, of survival, though her own heart trembled with questions. The stars wheeled overhead, silent witnesses to two hearts that had brushed for only a breath, yet carried the touch into the night. And as the firelight dimmed, the cowboy lifted his gaze toward the horizon, knowing that something had shifted. The land was the same, the sky the same, but he no longer felt quite so alone. What he did not yet know was that in 2 days' time, the sound of hooves would rise upon that horizon, and the quiet rescue he thought already fading into memory would return to change everything. The days after the rescue passed in stillness, though the cowboy's heart carried no such calm. He worked his ranch with the same sure rhythm as always, mending fences, feeding stock, checking water lines. But each task felt thinner somehow, stretched across thoughts that would not leave him. He remembered the dark fire of her eyes, the children's hollow faces, the rope burning against his hands, as if it were the only thread between life and loss. He told himself she and her little ones were far from him now, safe with her people, yet memory clung like dust on his coat. On the second evening the air shifted. He felt it before he saw it, the faint tremor in the ground, the low pulse of many hooves. The sun had only just begun to sink, painting the sky in copper, when a long trail of riders crested the ridge. Dust rose around them like smoke. He stood still, hand resting lightly on the butt of his rifle, though he did not raise it. This was not a herd. This was a tribe. They came with pride in their bearing, with bows strung and lances upright, a wall of horsemen moving as one body. At their center rode the woman he had pulled from the earth, her braids now brushed, her dress cleaned, her chin lifted. Around her, men guarded closely, their eyes sharp with suspicion. He knew at once this would not be a meeting of gratitude alone. They reined in before his homestead, a half-circle of wary gazes. The leader stepped forward, broad-shouldered, fierce in his stare. He spoke in a voice like flint striking stone, demanding to know what had passed, what bargain this cowboy had struck to return a woman and her children alive. The cowboy answered with calm. No bargain, no price. Life was worth saving, and he had done what any man should do. The words unsettled them. They shifted, glanced among themselves. In a land where white men so often took and rarely gave, this answer rang strangely. Still, suspicion lingered. The woman spoke then, her voice low but clear. She told them of the pit, the mud swallowing, the rope that had held, the children pulled to safety one by one. She told it without embellishment, without softening, and yet in her telling something trembled. An unspoken admission that his courage had reached her in ways she could not yet name. Her brother, the leader, did not soften. His gaze cut like a knife as he turned back to the cowboy. "Why?" he asked again. "What reason?" The cowboy only shook his head. Because they were hers. Because no child should vanish into the earth with no hand to reach for them. Because he could not have ridden away. Yet he said none of that aloud, only let his silence speak. The tribe stayed near in the days that followed, camping within sight of his fences. The air grew thick with unease, for he was one man and they were many, and though they did not threaten, neither did they trust. The children wandered first, shy steps toward his corral, laughter breaking loose when a young foal nosed their palms. Their mother allowed it, though her eyes never left them. Each evening she called them back with a word, and they obeyed, but each day they drifted nearer again, drawn by some quiet warmth they sensed in him. He found himself speaking to them as he worked, not grand stories but small things, the names of horses, the way seeds should be planted after rain, the song of a meadowlark. They did not understand every word, yet they listened, and sometimes they smiled. She watched this carefully, her face unreadable. But when one of the children fell and scraped a knee, and he crouched to wrap it gently in a strip of cloth torn from his shirt, she did not pull the child away. She only looked at him with eyes caught between gratitude and warning. Nights came heavy with stars. He often found her by the river, drawing water with a steady hand. Once he joined her there, not close, but near enough to hear her breath. He spoke then, haltingly, of land and years, of how wide a man's wealth could grow, and yet how empty his house might remain. She listened, silent, her gaze fixed on the waters, shifting silver. When she spoke at last, her words carried the weight of loss. Family gone to hunger, storms that stripped the earth bare, children who might not have survived another week. They did not speak of love. They spoke of survival. Yet in the hush that followed, something deeper stirred, a recognition that each saw the other not as enemy, not as charity, but as a soul carrying wounds too heavy for words. The tribe watched closely, uneasy at the quiet bridge forming. Her brother most of all bristled, his pride refusing the thought that she might lean even slightly toward a man not of their blood. He spoke of leaving soon, of riding far, of keeping her beyond reach. She said little, though her silence was not surrender, but thought. When the time came, they gathered to ride. The children clung to her sides, casting backward glances at the ranch, at the man who had saved them. The cowboy stood on his porch, hands at his sides, face unreadable, though his chest felt hollow. She mounted without looking at him, but as the riders formed their line, she slipped something from her hand. Quietly she laid it on his step before turning away, a small bracelet of beads, worn but carefully kept, the work of a child's hand. He did not move until they were gone, until the dust had settled and the prairie was wide and empty once more. Then he knelt, lifted the bracelet, felt its rough string press against his calloused fingers. The bead shone faintly in the fading light, each one a whisper of presence, of gratitude, perhaps of something braver still. The wind sighed across the land, carrying no answers. He stood alone again, the silence of his ranch folding in around him, yet something within him had shifted. The bracelet lay in his palm, small and fragile, and yet it weighed more than all the gold and cattle he owned. That night he did not sleep. He sat by his fire, the beads glimmering against the glow, and wondered what it meant. A gift? A farewell? Or a promise he had no right to hope for? The flames hissed softly, sparks rising like stars, and he felt the ache of a man who had tasted the briefest touch of connection only to find himself empty again. Far across the prairie, she rode with her people, her children drowsy against her sides. She did not speak, but her hand brushed her wrist where the bracelet once rested. Her brother's words echoed, warning, suspicion, anger. But beneath them lay another truth she could not quiet. The man had asked nothing. He had taken nothing. And still he remained in her thoughts, steady as the rope that had once pulled her from the earth. The trail stretched long ahead, uncertain. Yet even as the tribe pressed forward, her gaze drifted backward, toward a ranch now hidden by distance. The night gathered around them, but her heart carried the quiet, dangerous warmth of something beginning, though she dared not name it. And on his porch, the cowboy closed his hand around the bracelet, the small weight pulsing like a heartbeat against his skin, not knowing that this fragile thread between them would soon be tested, pulled, and tied into something unbreakable. The weeks that followed stretched like an endless plain, each day rising and falling without the sound of children's laughter or the dark gaze of the woman who haunted him. The cowboy worked his land as always, mending posts, counting cattle, listening to the hush of wind in the grass, yet none of it filled him. The ranch, vast and prosperous, felt colder than it ever had. He kept the small bracelet in his pocket, its beads warmed by his touch each time he drew it out at night by the fire. He would turn it slowly, bead by bead, as if it were a rosary, as if each color held the echo of her voice. He did not name what had taken root in him. He only knew he missed what he had never truly had. Dawn broke one morning with a strange tremor beneath the earth, the same pulse he had felt once before. He stepped onto his porch, rifle leaning against the wall though his hands were bare. A cloud of dust lifted on the horizon, riders cutting across the plain. His heart clenched, uncertain whether to brace for hostility or hope. As the shapes grew nearer, he saw her at the front. Not a victim this time, not mud-stained and trembling, but proud, steady, her children close at her sides. Behind her came warriors, cautious yet calmer than before. The sight pulled something loose inside him, like a knot giving way. They drew to a halt before his homestead, the earth quivering beneath their horses. The leader, her brother, swung down first, his face stern, his jaw tight. He spoke harshly, his words sharp, demanding again what this cowboy wanted from his sister. The cowboy met his gaze and did not flinch. He wanted nothing but her happiness, he said quietly. He sought no land, no power, no trade. Only that her children live with laughter again. Only that she find safety. The brother's eyes narrowed, suspicion still alive, but his anger faltered. Too many nights he had watched his sister's hollow grief. Too many times heard her children cry from hunger. The woman stepped forward before more words could cut. Her voice carried, steady as stone worn by river. She spoke of the rescue, of how he had risked his life without demand. She spoke of the night since, where she felt his absence like an ache she could not name. Her people listened, shifting uneasily. She was not one to speak with her heart bare, yet here she stood, declaring it. Her brother's pride fought hard against her honesty, but truth has a weight heavier than pride. At last he looked away, jaw-locked, and gave a curt nod. In the days that followed, the tribe lingered once more, though this time the air carried less suspicion. The children ran freely, chasing foals through the corral, their laughter ringing like bells. She moved through his land with quiet grace, not as stranger now, but as someone testing the shape of belonging. Sometimes they spoke at twilight, her hands busy weaving, his carving wood by the fire. Their words were not of romance, but of scars, of burdens carried, of nights survived. He told her of battles with drought, of watching wealth mean nothing when the heart is starved. She told him of hunger that had stolen voices from her family, of the silence left behind. It was not passion that grew first between them, but understanding. It was a gentle thread, spun stronger each day, until even the tribe began to see that what bound them was not weakness, but strength, the kind that comes when two broken pieces find they fit. Her brother remained stiff, his pride unwilling to bow, yet he did not pull her away. He could not when her children bloomed before his eyes, cheeks fuller, eyes brighter, their laughter spilling like spring water. One evening, as the sun bled across the sky, they sat by the river's edge. The children slept nearby, their bodies curled like kittens in the grass. The woman's voice trembled as she spoke, confessing she had feared her children would not live to see another season until he came. She admitted she had not trusted men, had expected cruelty or demand, yet he had given only his strength, his silence, his steadiness. The cowboy lowered his gaze, the weight of her words pressing heavy. He spoke then of emptiness, of nights in a house too large for one, of riches that echoed like a hollow drum. When he lifted his eyes, hers were waiting, unflinching, and for the first time neither looked away. They did not call it love. They did not need to. It was there in the way his hand brushed hers as he passed her water, in the way she did not pull back. It was there in the way she watched him with her children, in the way his eyes softened when they clung to her skirts. It was steady, quiet, growing not like fire, but like roots digging deep, unseen yet unshakable. The tribe gathered soon after, a circle wide beneath the stars. There was no church, no preacher, no grand display. There was only earth beneath their feet and sky above. He stood before her, his hands rough, a simple silver band clasped between his fingers. She faced him, holding a woven cord she had made with her own. They spoke vows not in ceremony, but in promise. His voice low, hers steady, words that belonged to no language but the heart. He slipped the ring onto her finger. She tied the cord around his wrist, and the circle closed with murmurs of approval. The children clung to them both, laughter bubbling bright, their eyes alive with the knowledge that family had returned to them in a way they had never dared dream. Her brother looked on, arms folded, pride still stiff, yet even he could not deny the sight before him. Their strength together, the steadiness of what had been born from mud and rope, hunger and silence. The cowboy, once a man of solitude, now stood with more than wealth, more than land. He stood with a family pressed close to his sides, with love that asked for nothing but gave everything. The fire crackled, stars burned fierce above, and he felt at last what it meant to be whole. Yet as joy circled them, a shadow stirred in his chest, small but undeniable. For the west was wide, and peace was fragile. He knew that love such as theirs would not be free from trial, that the world beyond their circle would not always honor the vows they had spoken. He held her hand tighter, silver band gleaming against firelight, as if to shield her from what storms might come. And while the night carried laughter, warmth, and vows sealed beneath the sky, the cowboy's gaze drifted once more to the horizon, dark and endless, whispering of trials not yet faced, of a future both fragile and fierce.